Kevin Spenst is the author of the poetry collections Ignite, Jabbering with Bing Bong, and Hearts Amok, a memoir in verse, and over a dozen chapbooks, including Pray Goodbye, Ward Notes, Surrey Sonnets, and most recently, Upend. He sometimes co-hosts interviews on Wax Poetic on Co-op Radio with R.C. Wisłowski, Lucia Misch, and Sophia Rose. He lives in Vancouver on ceded Coast Salish territory with the love of his life, Shauna Kendo.
Thanks, Scott, for that introduction.
Yep.
Cayendo. But I don't know. Maybe there are other variations.
I did an endo on my bike the other day. I just fell off. I'm going to call it my Cayendo. Anyways, we'll let you go. Thanks, Kevin.
Lovely. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks so much for having me. Thanks. It's great to see the team here via Zoom. There are these things that we long for, that is being in the physical company of others and that sort of community. But then, via Zoom, we get to see kind of behind the scenes, which is very cool. So thanks everybody for working so hard to put this together. And thank you so much to my other co-readers. And I thought it was kind of neat, Francine Cunningham, she said that, you said that you did the art for your cover, and I did the corner doodles for my book. Shauna, my partner, this is her art on the cover. So it's kind of a collaborative effort. And I want to start just by remembering a dear poet who is so important to so many poetry communities here in the Lower Mainland. I remember reading in New Westminster. I think that was one of the first places that I read at, maybe 2012 or 13 when I was starting. And Dean Simmers, Neil was a big part of that community, and was so important, and is so important. And I wrote something the other day, the other morning I woke up and I journal write every morning, and then sometimes it becomes something other than just writing about being tired and making my coffee. This is untitled. It's for Dean Simmers. Every death blows out a wish for loved ones to live. After the tolling news, tears, sullen logistics, and the keeling shocks, to live bound in the quick of a voice forever inside all of us. And the more who die, the more we're fastened towards a shared silence we will speed into too. I remember hearing about Dean Simmers through his daughter, first of all, who's a poet. And I remember Ren telling me, my dad's a poet. And I just wanted to remember him. Hearts Amok, a memoir in verse. I got an email from somewhere, was it Windsor, Ontario the other day, and it was somebody processing this book at a library, or I think it was a library, and he asked, is it true? He needed to know where to, how to slot it and where to organize it. And it's a book of poetry, and well, what is poetry, true or false, or how slant is your poem? But this is called a memoir in verse. So he wanted to know the facticity behind it. And I said, yes, it is based on my life. And so I guess that helped him in some ways. It's a memoir of my loves, and also the idea of love and how love has been shaped over the course of my life. It's written in a number of different sections. I'm going to read from the first part, Gallant Moocher, which kind of gives an overview of everything. And this is called Apologia from Hoboken Christendom. If my metaphors unmake her allegorical gusto, gambling mouth, glasses glinting high to the sun, sword swung questions, somersault quests, tongue that probes teeth, or truth, if she fails to stroll before you, glaze mezcal-tinted subtleties, grow blueberries from abandoned moats, craft sites for queens and gunsels, transmogrify your hands to maps, mosey off of her own accord, you can blame my sing-song spatchcock, my bindle-stick stock of words, my tin ear for heating metallurgy of the dead. Blame my wingding displays of old flames, my possum water eyes, my cloudily enraptured brains, for I wandered lonely as a clod, a night of the road, took my solarettes off at the trash can blaze, and I swear, she's in a note above odds, bodkins, and train whistles in a song sustained around the jackalope roast until infinity flatlines for broke. Yeah, so it's a memoir. I'm using different discourses, blending some hobo slang and well, some medieval high chivalric diction. This next poem is called A Worshipful Deriding of Flim Flam, and it, well, I'll just read it. Midway along our King George journey, I nodded off in a claggy corner of the bus, bum-rushed into a world wondrous strange, a land of scrap metal mayhem for a throat-clearing escutcheon scraper and a griffin grappling a horned rabbit at Wally's corner. My gaze gathered up the side of the road, seeking hoboglyphs of a single woman. I swooned at the image merely in mind, and my heart leapt out as a wolperdinger. It hopped extra high upon its pheasant wings, bounded down hard on its antlers, shadows, bolted off to I know not where. I sang in a fusion of con and pro while tracking myself into a forest named, Before thou lovest, thou must. After heartless hours, I came upon a camp of ex-evangelicals extracting theological thorns from their hides. They spoke of brain pan washing, mindset rust, how they'd swallowed so much of the corpus of Christ, their bellies now bloated in disbelief. Awkwardly begassed, my insides glittered in fool's gold too. Love lustered in screeds, weaned as I was on post-Mennonite ballyhoo, chasing goosebump moments around at Johnson Heights Evangelical, where an angel with a gilt-edged sword severed my sight. I spak of how dimpled hallelujahs danced around my head, and I would give chase. My heart hopped, sniffed at renditions of sexy righteousness. Then, under hard-scrabble guilt, I'd faceplant. After a gloss of faith, I forevermore shilly-shallied twixt hosannas and holy shits, like a gambling lamb along Hunger Lane. After a fortnight, I bid this company of unborn-again tramps adieu, walked my old love-lorn suburbopia past the smack glimmer of Guilford Castle towards the skateboards of Cloverdale. That funny heart highballed past, and I ran. It dove into a drain at the basement of my childhood. Abandon all mope, ye who enter, crooned the darkness. Loosed in translation, the uprooted pipes of yore shall crumple done in your fist to flower through your fingers. This will be your torch to her truth, and forbearance shall make your cardinal points to one the other. So, yeah. A lot of dramatics, and I was a very dramatic young man, praying fervently, and I wanted to be a minister when I was 14, and then I stopped believing. So that kind of put a dead end to that dream and that vocation. But fortunately, poetry allows all sorts of voices and reimaginings. One more poem just from this first section, and this is kind of reimagining adolescence. A goat herd's palaver clackety clacks. In those alpine times of youthful feelings, our hearts yodeled blandishments of agony. To make more's worse, I learned in church that unless I paced a fine line following choice Bible verses, I'd be dicing a bad order to hell. At 14, I prayed for the gaze of the new girl whose mullet jostled like a roller coaster. I dreamt a song of Solomon. Her cheeks spun like roller skates in the Wally stardust. Her mascara as occluding as Phoenix metaphysical books. Her hair a stage for heavy metal quakes and pyroclastics. I sweated hours into drawing her flowers of my affection. Prayers unanswered, my soul slouched into an Iron Maiden forgery. I grew up in Surrey, British Columbia, and this book kind of reimagines Surrey, BC as Surrey, England, medieval Surrey, England. I'm going to jump ahead a bit to the next section, which actually, and I'm going to read a poem which I have never read before. I've never read from before. I've never read this poem from this book before, but the mention of Northern Ireland earlier and watching a series set in Northern Ireland a little while ago triggered my Northern Irish accent. And I'm not doing a very good job now. Oh, there, that's better. It's all in the now if you've never done it before. How you doing? So I married an Irish woman, and the second section is falling in love with her and getting married. And this poem that I'll read from this is, oh gosh, where is it? It's forgetting our anniversary, and then we went and watched a movie about Northern Ireland, which was a fine date for somebody from Northern Ireland, but it's rather dark. This is called Hands Held at Symbiotic Angles. I forget our first anniversary, ergo, out of the blue, I cobble violet flowers and a film. Oh ma, we hold hands tight through the last detonation to blister the distance of your country. The car bomb concluding the troubles. Hundreds of fields away, you hold onto the reins of your horse. You grow up down that rain-slicked road into Belfast with your da, delivering tulips within bomb shot of new and antiquated atrocities, splayed in murals of weaponry and dates, and offhand heraldry of brick and mortar. On our double-decker tour, the guide jokes that the hockey team was named the Belfast Bombers. At the next turn, he tears the Titanic a new one. Hand in hand, we laugh, linger, enter the octagon of family. The smaller the town, the more bare-knuckled the graffiti. When the past churns up, you hold my fingers ashen white. Later, we find your old yellow diary with one page filled in. Maths boring, English boring, history boring, riding good. And I'll read a couple more poems from, the last section. And this last section is called Upend, and it's about dating again, kind of in your 40s, and the world's changed. You do it all online, of course, as we're doing this online, and yeah, and so I'll read from this, and this is about finding that special somebody. The last first date. You rode in with a horizon falling behind like a dumpled parachute. Your smile landed. Our tires treaded close to each other. Two giant birds bequested our conversation with overarching attention. The sun glamored in. We clicked our helmet straps into place, cycled to whiskey. From there, we dabbled deep in chemistry. We'd crossed paths over the past 20 years. I bought earrings from you at Dream. You saw a short I acted in at the Blinding Light. Your heart had moved you to Mexico, Madrid, and then LA, but these weren't failures. We learn each time, you said, through alchemizing exactitude. We sat on art made of metal. You farted. Le coup de foudre! True story, so that's true. So the fellow who asked if this book is based on real events, on our first date, Shauna Cayendo farted on a bit of public art, and she's listening to this, so it's no secret. So two more poems from the last section. And this is called The Summer I Dated Everyone. And it begins with an epigraph from Mandy Len Catron, and her book, How to Fall in Love with Anyone, was a helpful read as I was thinking through these poems and thinking about love. That and Carrie Jenkins' What Love Is was also a really interesting philosophical examination of the underpinnings of the concept of love. Mandy Len Catron, love didn't happen to us. We're in love because we each made the choice to be. How many writs a day do we follow? What kind of script gets us onto the stage? How do we go off script without scaring our co-stars? What kind of exchanges can we imbue with beauty? But really, have you ever rehearsed a word? Do you have a secret hunch about how to live? Tell me about the most important thing you can't remember. Is there a power dynamic here? What if I compared your eyelashes to scripture? If you met the playwright of your life, would you throw flowers, bricks, or suggestions? Tell me, what have you done to all your polyvocal cravings? And the last poem that I'd like to read from this is the very last, the penultimate poem in the book. And it's about finding our place together here in the West End. And it's called Epilogue, Logos, Flip and Sigh. You snore, I write. The crow cawing outside your dreams lands as a new treetop. Others shuffle off snow from the branches of the maple. Your eyes and cheeks bound and blink. Snow renders us wild-eyed in a storybook morning with no child-proof fingerprints. We make up for it, everything present. My heart, for example, is a wall with a dozen dogs leaping to jump out, lick you on the face. Our building prohibits pets. Like any bed elevated in the city, ours was once a patch of flyway, a commotion of rushing wings in past abundances. Let's start a shrine behind the old milk cupboard door where we shelter animal whims. You wake from your dream trajectory. The pleasure of patience dawns down to the ballast blanket and ground. Between kisses, your eye holds the colossal cedar, power posing outside our window. Trains of thought chug along past old roots, realms of rust-anchored hierarchies. We lay tracks together from an alloy of old crowns, horizon-sliced light. We rise and shine our Rasselbach embossed handcart, our three-wheeled velocipede, our mode of thought tracked in tales of our long journey into each other's dilly-dallying. On its side we etch, let's ease through love's narrow door. Tomorrow we'll dawn ourselves again.
I apologize if it's a little academic, but I'm really fascinated with what you're doing with the suburbs. I'm sitting here in Wally, of all places, and kid from Aldergrove, and I'm thinking, if I read people like Roger Nash with Psalms from the Suburbs or Atwood's City Dwellers, the suburbs don't exist. It's always this point of passage between the city, which is real, and the wilderness, which is this idea. And then there's your work, and I think of other people who are local here, Bill Nickerson or Liz Baczynski, and the suburbs are this real place. And it's like it's a good place. It's a fascinating place. It's a place we want to explore and know more about. And I'm just curious: is that something that's deliberate, or is it just part of lived experience coming out in the poetry? Because I can't really tell if this is like an East Coast, West Coast, or East Central Canada, West Coast thing, or if this is something other people are being deliberate about.
That's an interesting question. And I think of Judy McInnes. She wrote Snatch, which is set in Surrey. So that's a book from Anvil Press, I think, that came out. Oh gosh, I'm not sure. Maybe 2003. That's kind of give or take some years. So, and I guess growing up, I was very self-conscious about being from Surrey. And I remember leaving Surrey, and then I was 20, 21, and and I remember being asked, what was it like growing up in Surrey? And I was being asked by another 20-year-old, maybe he was from like, I don't know, East Van or somewhere else. And I was thrown by that question a little, well, I was thrown and I didn't know how to respond to that. And of course, it was awkward and he was kind of exoticizing or kind of making it sound, oh, what is it like? How did you survive? But so I've been conscious of that. And Surrey is, I think, a particularly interesting area in terms of being on the border, being very rural. I was close to Cloverdale, so very, somewhat historic, rural. I watched a suburb kind of emerge across the street from what was a farm that my sisters there was a farm with horses. My sisters grew up 10, 11, 12 years older than me. They were riding those horses across the street. And then the farm was, the place was sold. And then we literally watched over 10, 20 years, a suburb kind of buttress up against our place. So I guess being conscious of all of that, and then just coming out of a tradition of writing about what I was seeing and thinking about, I guess, naturally, in a sense, kind of led me to write about Surrey, I think. And this is just off the top of my head. But yeah. And my second book, well, Jabbering with Bing Bong is coming of age, growing up in Surrey. Ignite is also related to Surrey, but thinking about my father's schizophrenia. And and that was also part of that geography. I'm, going to school, and then suddenly there's my dad's face. He's looking in the window, and I'm terribly embarrassed. But again, it's kind of, the setting is Surrey, and it feels essential somehow. Yeah, I could talk. I'll write more about it. Think more about it. Give you a better, more concise answer. But thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question that you didn't expect to ask. Yeah. Any other?
Neffert.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, pardon me. Sorry to interrupt. Hi, Kevin. I know you as a performer, a singer, and an actor, and I'm curious how much performance informs your creative process, especially when it comes to putting words on the page, and if you see the words on the page as the destination, or if the destination of your poem lives somewhere else.
That's interesting, and it's an interesting thing to consider the creative process. For me, for the most part, when I'm writing on the page, it is written with the page as a kind of end goal. The page is kind of the finish line that I'm trying to cross. And then once it's published, then it feels like, then it becomes something else. Now, from time to time, I will write with a very clear kind of voice or idea of how something might be performed. But for the most part, I prefer, apart from just listening for alliteration and assonance, and listening for, those qualities, those poetic qualities that we love in poetry. I'm listening for those with that inner ear, but the book itself feels like a stage. The book itself feels like it can then transform those poems into something else. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Great question. Was that Adric that asked that? I think so.
Short A, Adric.
Oh, Adric. Hey,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you. And any other? I'm looking around.
Nefertiti has a question: which part of Surrey? And maybe this is also part of my fascination of where I'm from. That is, I never really knew it as a place until I was older. And I grew up at 168th and Fraser Highway, 168th, which at one point was Coast Meridian Road, I think was the term that was used when they were kind of laying it out, when the surveyors were laying the grid out. And then Fraser Highway was also Old Yale Road at some points. So it was kind of this kind of historic intersection, yet I had no idea where we were really, because Cloverdale was down the road a ways, and then Fleetwood was up the Fraser Highway, and I just didn't really even think we had any particular name. We were the Surrey Golf Course as far as I knew, because they were huge and they took up a lot of land. And then my mom had, she had some deal where she got $50 a month for having the Surrey Golf Course sign in our front yard. And so maybe as a kid, I was like, oh, where are the golfers?
Good answer. Any other ones? Oh yes, Aiden.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing?
Aiden, good, thanks.
Loved your read. This book was really fascinating for me because I feel like you explore language in ways that I haven't really come across, particularly in a while. And I was going to ask you, what is hobo slang and troubadourish diction for those of us that are, that's not a world we really sort of jump into.
You might have heard like ride the rails, maybe, as like a term, like, you know, to like take the train, like to jump in a boxcar and go somewhere. So ride the rails. Or well, in that first poem that I read, wingding was a term that I used, and wingding is not just a shitty font. Wingding is a term, the hobo term for feigning convulsion, and then maybe getting some money or charity or help or food or something. So hobo slang kind of emerged in the 1870s, 1880s, as the trains were crossing, were being built and laid across North America. Then these kind of single men started riding the rails and moving from place to place. And as they moved from place to place, there was kind of this idea of hobos, and also this idea of hobo slang. Hobo glyphs would be marks that hobos would make outside of a town to give information to other hobos. And this is something that kind of developed in popular kind of culture as well, or the conception of hobos having this language, having kind of having jungles. There were hobo jungles. Here in Vancouver, there was a story of a warehouse being built, and the frames had just been laid in place. And this is maybe 1930 or something. And the next day, it was gone. And it was discovered later that it was used to build a hobo jungle. Like the hobos had come and taken it, and they used it to build kind of some infrastructure for a makeshift area under a bridge. I'm not sure where exactly, if that would have been Crab. There's one village close to Indian Arm. I think there were two communities, and they were like squatter villages, but sometimes also related to that. So yeah.